All right, so it's been almost 3 weeks since I was able to do one of these. And actually, the last 12 days, I haven't really been able to do one because I've gotten sick for the third time this winter with another sinus infection. It's funny, I'm phobic about getting ill, but I work kind of with the public, so I'm exposed to a zillion different germs, even though I'm always using hand sanitizer, and even though I'm always, popping vitamins and all kinds of other quack remedies, probably. This will be my third time I've gotten sick this winter alone. But partially, we've been having these weird temperatures going up and down all over the place. So I'm just ready for springtime, is all I'm going to say. I'll try to get through this one without sniffling and hacking and coughing all over the place. But this week, I was kind of thrown into a new position at work again. It was something that I was kind of in unfamiliar territory, and it was really a stressful situation. And somehow or the other, when I was kind of thinking about what I wanted to talk about, and of course it's kind of been on my mind anyway, the subject matter I wanted to bring up for this particular video, uh, there's a there's a part in their Quackaholics Anonymous Big Book where it says, job or no job, wife or no wife, et cetera, et cetera. Let nobody say they can't get well or some shit like that. I could have looked up the exact quote, but I think anybody who's watching these that's ever sat in Quackaholics Anonymous meetings probably knows exactly what I'm talking about. And it's one thing to say that external circumstances alone shouldn't prevent you from trying to quit addictive behavior if that's your ultimate goal. But it's another thing entirely to do what AA is kind of doing in the context there. In fact, it's kind of prevalent all throughout their literature, and it's very prevalent in the meetings. The way that when people talk about personal issues that bother them, or they talk about things going on in their everyday life, like real world things that doesn't stick by the cult script, which is just regurgitating the same old tired doggerel lines over and over again. It's belittled. It's kind of looked down upon. Like if you're really coping with a tough external circumstances in your everyday life situation and you want to talk about it, which is ironically enough supposed to be the one thing that you need to do in order to cope with stress or to cope with whatever it is, especially if you're trying to stop an addiction, because I think anybody who's ever been addicted to drugs or alcohol or anything else knows that when the external circumstances of your life are intolerable, the first thing you normally want to do by default is go find the thing that actually relieves the stress or takes away the hopeless outlook. I think it would be more of a description of my really worst years is when I was really abusing alcohol heavily. I've looked back on it in retrospect a lot since being able to get away from AA and being able to get away from the cult thinking. I've actually had an opportunity to kind of take an objective look at my own really rough history with intense alcohol abuse, and I realized that a lot of the times when I was going through those really bad benders, or when I was going through when I was really down and out with my own addiction, the overall outlook I had at the time was I felt really hopeless. Everything seemed really hopeless, and I didn't see a viable option or a viable solution or a viable way to deal with it. And of course, drinking didn't actually solve the problem itself, but it made the hopeless situation seem less hopeless, or at least it put you in a place where you didn't worry about the situation for at least a little while. And to belittle someone's external circumstances when they're trying to put down an addiction, I think, is very detrimental. Well, I believe, I know in my case it was very detrimental because it's external circumstances which affect us anyway. I mean, AA is trying to cheapen it, anything externally that you feel as a person, your own feelings, your own problems, the things you deal with, the everyday realities that you deal with, by saying that none of that really matters. That all you got to do is surrender to the cult and turn everything over to the AA higher power. I don't know if there's any fans of H.P. Lovecraft out there or not when it comes to horror, but he had a whole universe of these entities that he called the great old ones and the outer gods and all that. But there was one of them that was called the blind idiot god. And there was something about that phrase I always liked, the blind idiot god. And that's kind of what I've come to call the higher power that the AA people are always talking about all the time, the blind idiot god that only cares whether you drink or not. But they're saying that everything externally shouldn't affect you at all, including your feelings, your emotions, or anything else. That if you're I guess what is that one phrase they use a lot? Reliance, not defiance. So in other words, if you're totally submissive to the cult and its religion, nothing externally should bother you. And it's actually, I mean, it's funny. I didn't even actually see how illogical that was at the time when I was all wrapped up in the cult religion, but it's very obvious that human beings, okay, experience reality through what's going on around them externally. Everything and through the things they feel about those things. I mean, if you don't believe external circumstances affect you, wake up one morning and have a bad sinus infection and see if that doesn't alter your outlook or affect everything the way you view the world at the time. Lay awake at 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes when you wake up and tell me that you don't have a whole cycle of really negative thoughts running around in your head when you can't get back to sleep. Tell me that these thoughts, which have something to do with anxieties, which have something to do with things that you worry about externally going on in the world around you, doesn't affect your reality, doesn't affect your outlook. Wake up one morning and find out you don't have any money in your bank account, that somebody hacked into it last night and stole every penny of it, and the bank doesn't know what to do about it. And tell me that doesn't affect your outlook on life. Go to a doctor for a normal routine checkup and find out you've got some kind of debilitating condition or life-threatening illness, and tell me that doesn't affect your outlook on life or the way you perceive reality around you, or the way you feel or the way you sense reality around you. All things external, even if it's, I could keep going on with this. I mean, wake up one morning and find out someone you love and care about is dying from a terminal illness, or wake up one morning and find out someone you care deeply about is in the hospital injured, and you don't have all the details. I mean, and tell me that doesn't affect your outlook and the way you perceive reality and the way you feel. These are all very real things. And as someone who is addicted, usually when you get to some organization like Quackaholics Anonymous, you're looking for help. You're looking for ways to cope with even not so much, the really devastating horrors that are a part of life, but just your everyday, normal, trivial things that normally you don't know how to cope with without, doing your drink or doing your drug or doing whatever it is you're addicted to. And you're told, well, all these things that have affected you out there, they don't matter at all anyway, because, if you, there goes the dryer. That's affecting my external reality right there. The dryer's buzzing on me. But they're saying that, if you're relying on the cult religion and you're surrendering, then you should be serene all the time and external circumstances shouldn't matter whatsoever. And yet the funny thing about it is that I in retrospect, again, I couldn't see it at the time. A lot of what the people who seem to be addicted to AA were doing, and I've talked about this before in other videos, they were just swapping one addiction from another addiction. The addiction was sitting in AA. I've heard this little funny term before about stick with the winners, and I used to think about, well, what is it you're winning in AA exactly? I mean, what is it you're accomplishing in AA that you could construe as winning? I mean, you get a medallion that says that you haven't drank in X amount of years. You get to talk to a room full of strangers every night about, you can't even tell the truth about how you really feel. You have to put spin on it with cult phrases and cult slogans and reiterate stuff that comes out of the big book. You get to do that. You get to talk to a room full of strangers, gets to listen to you. You get to speak occasionally and tell your story, and everybody pretends that they're hearing it. And that's about all you accomplish in AA. I mean, so I don't really, in my world, in my outlook on reality today, I don't look at that as actually winning anything. I mean, the definition I would have in my own personal life of winning since leaving AA was being able to do things like get my driver's license back when the judge who took him away several years ago said that I would never drive again, and he was certain of it. And he would make certain I'd never drive again. In fact, I could do a whole video on how crooked the legal system is and what I had to go through to finally get my license back, but that's another video. But when I was holding that driver's license in my hand after all the shit that I went through for it, that felt like a win to me. It felt like a good accomplishment, and it was a fight that I had to do. It wasn't something I accomplished by surrendering and dodging life by sitting in meetings. A couple of other things that's happened in my life since leaving AA, I mean, that would constitute a win. There's no winning, in my opinion, if you're just sitting in a room and saying that you're sick and diseased and you can't accomplish nothing on your own, and the external circumstances of the world doesn't matter. In reality, what you're doing is you're using that room, those meetings, as another fix. You're not really living the so-called life on life's terms that they're always talking about. You're escaping life, by hiding in meetings and saying you can't deal with it. And it's kind of like what I opened up with on this video when I was saying I got thrown into an unfamiliar situation at work, and I had to deal with it. And I wasn't very happy with it. To be honest, I was pretty unhappy with it. I'm sure there's plenty of people watching this that know what I'm talking about, where you go to work one morning and you get a new responsibility tacked on to you with a job that you're not familiar with, with the new responsibility. And they say, well, we're going to train you. And training consists of maybe 10 or 15 minutes of them showing you half-assedly what to do. And then all of a sudden you're abandoned and you're on your own and you have to figure it out. And then everybody around you is behaving like you should already know all these things, I guess through osmosis or through some kind of psychic powers. And you really don't. I mean, I'm sure I've heard stories from many people in many different fields that have had to cope with that very same scenario that I just outlined there. And it's not a good place to be. But, after about 2 days of it, the first thing that started to happen was, well, actually after the first couple of hours of it, I started to get kind of comfortable with it. I started to realize, okay, I can actually do this. I mean, this is not something that's just beyond the realm of possibilities. And I realized that anything that you do that's new, anything that you strive towards in terms of change, anything that you actually try to accomplish and strive for and work for is going to always be uncomfortable. It's outside of your comfort zone. Like quitting an addiction is outside of your comfort zone. But the only way to accomplish anything is by fighting outside of that comfort zone until whatever is unfamiliar to you actually becomes familiar. You see, when I first left the cult of AA and I was out here on my own, out there, like they're always saying, I didn't really know kind of what I was doing. I kind of had this, there goes the dryer again. I kind of had this feeling that I was in the middle of some country with a map with only vague outlines, and I had no way to navigate from point A to point B and how I was going to get there. It was only over a period of time that I was able to actually, find a place where I'm actually comfortable not drinking, not drugging, and not going to AA meetings and not buying into cult dogma anymore. But you can't really learn and grow. It's really funny. They talk about progress, not perfection, which you never seem to be able to accomplish in a room that tells you you're incapable of it. But you cannot actually navigate through unfamiliar territory, at least from my own perspectives, making this video at least almost, in November it'll be 3 years out of AA now. You cannot do that unless you faced unfamiliar territory and kind of metaphorically conquered it. Kind of like being thrown into an unfamiliar job, and then by the time you kind of figure out what you're doing, it's not this big, scary, horrifying, insurmountable thing that you cannot face. It becomes kind of second nature what you're dealing with. You can't really do that if you ignore the external circumstances by saying, well, I can get well in spite of these, but the only way I can get well is through surrendering and hiding behind some higher power to do it all for me. I think overall, what I was thinking about when I was doing this entire topic thing, I was thinking about the fact that one thing AA never taught me in over a decade of being inside in it was how to really cope with anything in the real world, or how to face any real world problems. Like if I had faced a situation like the situation I just faced with work, I would have done one or two things. In the old AA world, I would have either gone and got drunk because it was just, by the end of the day, I was nearly a nervous wreck, or I would have ran to an AA meeting and I would have sat there and I would have listened to them talk. And if I'd have got called on, I would have said, my ego was in the way of what I was trying to do, and I just need to learn to surrender, and I need to learn to be humble, and all of that. And I would have left the meeting with no lesson or no clear-cut understanding that when faced with new challenges, the best thing to do is to learn how to adapt and how to overcome them. AA never taught me anything in terms of anything useful in the real world. In other words, I didn't really understand how to do anything about my addictive behaviors to alcohol until I had to face the real world out here without the crutch of some religious cult behind me to rely upon to get through, the rough spots. Pretty much nowadays, I'm not saying I'm above a drink. I'm not going to say that, even if I did drink again, it doesn't have to mean it's going to be a drunken bender at the end of the world. But I'm saying that after almost 3 years away from the cult, and after almost 3 years without a drink itself, I think that I've actually kind of felt like I'm back to a place where, partially because I can rely on myself now to solve my own problems and to fix my own problems, I'm kind of at a place now where I have more self-confidence. And I can face things a little bit stronger than I used to could. I don't think in all my time in AA I ever really truly learned how to face the external circumstances of life, or how to cope with them without either escaping through sitting in meetings and being powerless, or being drunk. Those were the only two options available to me. And now that I'm away after almost 3 years, it's almost like the list of things that you could do, the list of things that you could try in order to overcome any kind of obstacle or any kind of problem is far greater than this one dichotomy of drunkenness and sobriety, which is really a very poor framework for how I see to navigate your way through life. Anyway, that's about all, I guess, for now, because I'm at 17 minutes, and I think I've pretty much made my point. Hopefully I'll get to do another one next week. Hopefully. We know how the schedule goes on here. It's sporadic. You can always hit the bell icon down here at the bottom, and you'll get a notification whenever I put a new one up. All right, till next time.